What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. Today's guest is a molder of minds. He develops amazing architectural designs. He's skilled at sustainable design. He's partner and founder at 3877. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Tracz. Welcome, Dave.
Hey. Hi, Dan. Good to see you.
It's so good to see you and hear you, and also to have seen you in person not too long ago.
Same.
And I just want to share with my guests on the intro, I've known you for a long time. And I think one of the cool things about how we are together here right now is I was having drinks with another former guest, Alia Khan from Marriott, at Crane's.
Yes.
And I hadn't seen her in forever. So it was like our first reunification, or one of our first reunifications after the pandemic. Went down to DC, this beautiful restaurant, which is like, it's really interesting. As you know, it's a smash up between Spanish and Japanese cuisine and culture. And I had like one of the best martinis of my life there with her, maybe more than one, but who's counting? But more importantly, it was just such an incredible way to catch up with a dear old friend. And as we were talking, she said that you were the architect here. I was like, you're kidding. And then like looking at a whole bunch of other restaurants around there, like right in the heart of DC, I didn't realize how many you had done. I mean, I know you have a successful practice, but it's always interesting to sit in somewhere, have a conversation, be relaxed, connect, and then also have known the person that designed this place. So I just want to say thank you on so many levels, but also for making that reunification with Alia that much more special. And you weren't even there, but you were there in spirit, I feel.
I feel like we were. I mean, I think I got a text from you, so I think kind of there. Yeah, it was. It's a lovely restaurant. It turned out beautifully, and the chef there is probably one of the nicest chefs that I've worked with. So I will have to let him know about the martini for sure. He's always excited to hear compliments for sure.
Oh yeah. What's the chef's name?
Pepe Moncayo.
Pepe Moncayo. Now, so for me, just being in there and having Japanese and Spanish mashed up, that's very unique.
It is.
How did that come to be?
You know, he had another restaurant in Singapore, which is where he moved from to open this restaurant, and it had a similar bent, but I think he took it a little further when he came here. He and his business partners felt like it was a good spot. DC was hungry for a restaurant, no pun intended, that had that kind of flair. I find it's kind of ironic that it's across the street from a purely Spanish restaurant, Boqueria.
Who randomly also, it's a friend of mine, Jan, owns that restaurant, and it's Spanish directly across the street.
Yeah. It's an interesting comparison because they have similar dishes in some cases too, which is one executed in a very different way and one executed in a very traditional way. So it's interesting across the board. But yeah, Pepe is a lovely person, and they've really done a good job of managing through the pandemic, considering they opened about a month and a half before everything started to shut down. So it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I loved it. And it was just this, I don't know, I felt like I was almost in a jewel box, but it wasn't, but it was also so comfortable, but just a lot of glass and steel, but somehow not feeling so austere, but very warm.
Yeah.
So I normally don't just go straight into the project thing, but like that's so as much as Japanese and Spanish is strange combining, there was that glass steel, but also somehow I felt warm. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I don't know, just all these juxtapositions going on.
Yeah.
How did you solve for that?
You know, I think the team did a really excellent job of marrying that balance of sort of starkness with warmth, as you're noting. I mean, I think you were probably hanging out in the bar area, which has an extremely warm feel to it. The wood beams above, the wood walls, All of the soft seating in that area really just make it feel like, a bar in somebody's living room, a very sophisticated person's living room, but a living room nonetheless. The dining area has a little bit of a different feel. It's a little bit more of a show place of focusing on the kitchen. So it's a little different, but in the bar, it is a very warm space. And they spend a lot of time trying to balance all of those components, working through the design of that space. And it's a fairly substantial restaurant too. It was about 12,000, or is about 12,000 square feet. So it's a big space.
Yeah. And I guess that's the gift of the architect or designer, is that, if you look just within the stone's throw of there, you have Boqueria, Cranes, around the corner, Succotash. I'm sure Need has other restaurants around there, but you've done so many and your work is so varied.
Yeah.
But and they're also very big spaces. So
Those in particular.
yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
those are substantial restaurants. Yes.
And right in the heart of everything. And then you have just, one of the things I love about Washington, D.C. is so many people from all around the world are just converging on there. And again, it's that Spanish, Japanese, you name it. Like you're basically creating all these bookends, but creating all these places for really interesting collisions to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that, actually. There was a dinner I think it was maybe either right or before or right after you were there with Alia. She was there with some other folks who were from Singapore, who ended up running into other people who were from Singapore and who all knew the chef from his previous life in Singapore. Just pure happenstance that all happened. So talk about worlds converging. It's pretty amazing.
I love that. And then also just how varied and different just those 3 different places within a stone's throw are.
Yeah.
And then not to mention all the hotel work that you've done. And then that warmth, right? And those collisions that are happening. I'm just curious how, with each of these projects so different, how do you focus on delivering that element of hospitality, or how do you define hospitality with having such a varied catalog of work, if you will?
Well, I think the key is that it doesn't necessarily come from the work. It comes from our personal mindset in the office. I think our team, both my business partner and I and our team all come at it from a similar approach to anybody coming into a restaurant or hotel. It's about hospitality from the moment you walk into our office. Now, our office definitely feels like an architectural office to an extent, but we treat people the way people expect to be treated in a restaurant or a hotel. We have, I wouldn't say we have a full-on restaurant in our office, but we have cocktails around when you need them. We have water. We have all the things that beer, wine, everybody that would expect to have to kind of keep them relaxed during maybe a stressful architectural design meeting.
Yeah. And I love how you said when you need them. So
Yeah.
they're always at the ready, because you never know when you may need them.
They are. We actually had a client for a while who would literally walk in the door, walk to the kegerator, pour himself a beer, and then sit down in the conference room. So that's when you knew the meeting was ready to start. But yeah, I think the key with us in general is just coming at it from the same approach that our clients do. We understand that.
Right. And then one of the things that I've loved about kind of all of your work, your team, and just kind of hearing about some things. Actually, recently I was listening to, you were on this Business of Architecture podcast. And I think you were talking about how, and I'm hearing you say that with your team, but also with your clients, just how you nurture those relationships and really build partnerships. And I just wonder, like, without kind of rehashing all the great stuff that you said there, like, how does that approach transcend everything? Because also for everyone listening, 3877 is also one of the few firms out there that has more people now than they did before the pandemic started. And being in hospitality, that's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. We consider ourselves very lucky in that sense. We've really pushed and made sure that we could come out of this in the right place. We've improved a lot of things, and luckily the clients came back around again. We didn't really expect that to happen, but it has, tenfold almost. So I think, the team as a whole, we sort of focus on that, making sure that we're driving in the right direction at all times from a hospitality standpoint. Shoot, what was the question again? Remind me.
Well, I mean, that's fine. So you're nurturing these relationships, right? For not just with clients, but also your team.
Yes.
But their relationships. So look, I feel like in every business is relational at a certain level, unless you're just clicking and buying something business to consumer. Maybe you develop a relationship with the graphic that's in front of you on the website, right?
Right.
It pulls you in, it hypnotizes you and sucks your sense of self out of yourself and just makes you push click, right? You get hypnotized. But in most businesses are all relational. I find that the hospitality businesses, of all the people I've been talking to, and just from my experience, I think the volume gets turned up on the importance and depth of those relationships.
Yeah.
So the question was, from nurturing those relationships, what you're really doing is building partnerships, not just with your clients, but also with your team. And how did that awareness develop within you? And how did you become aware of that?
It's funny you say that. I mean, honestly, that approach has been both my business partners and my approach for a long time. We want to make sure that we're sort of working with our clients for as long as we can. So it kind of gets back to the hospitality thing. You people are coming to a hotel, you want them to stay for as long and come back again. And that's exactly the approach that we sort of take. And you mentioned Need earlier. We're on restaurants like 9 and 10 with them. We've also worked on both of their houses. They bought one and sold one, bought a new one. We're working on one currently. So, it's just, to a point where you're just becoming friends. And, the work is almost like a byproduct of it, but it becomes more fun too, because you're working on something that you love doing, they love doing it, and it all comes out kind of beautiful at the end. So I think that approach really makes a big difference. So I think we really focus on just building that relationship, talking to them. It's not about the job, it's about us working together. Mm-hmm. And, I think we've always approached projects, business development, everything in that way. So, we'll get to know people, we'll know them for like 2 or 3 years, and I don't expect work. I just hope that it's going to come eventually, because we're good at what we do and we like to execute on beautiful projects. And, I think that mentality is just a better way to look at things. It's less stressful for sure, because you're not constantly trying to sell the next thing.
Mm-hmm. How do you, when you think about that idea of becoming friends with them, because it's more than the transaction, right? And I totally agree with you. How do you know in the course of that, the dating to maybe you're doing your first project or two, how do you know when you've crossed over into that friend, or you've gotten to that deeper place?
It's an excellent question. It's taken time in most cases. And honestly, I couldn't tell you where everyone kind of clicked. I don't know if that makes sense, but, I think maybe I can put my finger on it sometimes. I've had clients in the past where, you feel like you're just working together and working parallel for a long period of time. But there's a feeling when that shifts, when you start to connect on something that's not work related. And I'm remembering a client of mine at my previous firm who we had worked together on a project for maybe 3 or 4 months. We were just sort of talking, and, he hit on something about wine. He was a Brit, but he lived in California for a long time. And, as soon as we started talking about wine, and he knew I'm a big fan of wine across the board. He's lived in Napa Valley for a while, but we started clicking on that, and it was almost instantaneous, where you were like, we're in. I can see now that we're going to get where we need to go. And actually, I'll use this other anecdote with the Need guys. They may or may not remember this, but we finished Succotash, and Succotash was a challenging project. It's a beautiful restaurant. It's in a historic bank building. It's very unique for DC in that it's historic inside and out. It's one of, I think, 11 properties that are like that in the district. And so it was a slog to get everything built and constructed the way that they wanted to. You know, the mezzanine that if you've been in that space, the mezzanine wasn't part of that space. We actually had to get them to let us put it in.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
So yeah, but it looks like it was supposed to be there, right? So it worked very well in that instance. But by the time we got to the end of the project, they were at opening, and I had asked one of their kitchen designers is a friend of theirs for a very long time, and I asked him if he knew what their favorite wine was, and he was like, "Hold on." He asked their sommelier, and she got back to me. So I just came to the opening with a bottle of their favorite wine, and I think Jason has probably one of the best lines from that when I handed it to him, and he was like, "After everything we put you through."
Yeah,
I just thought it was the funniest response.
totally.
But I was like, yeah, I mean, this is, we're on the same page, right? You would do this to a guest in your restaurant, so why wouldn't I do that for you here?
Yeah.
So, and you know, since then, I think we've been out. My girlfriend Wendy and I and Jason and Michael have been out to dinner a number of times, just because it's just nice to chat, right? So it's truly becoming friends with your clients, and you know, it takes time and it takes effort, but I think it results in a better dynamic.
Yeah, as you were saying that, you kind of gave 3 examples, right? There's the slog, right? It's oh my God, we're going through hell to get this thing open.
Yeah.
Then there's this kind of shared interest. So you find out these shared interests, and then there's these moments when you're in the middle of it where you kind of take a pause and you can be kind of grateful and intentional and just kind of in the moment with them.
Yeah.
And I feel like each of those are kind of these crucible moments where, you know, these collisions are happening, but it's also that ability to kind of step out and be able to express gratitude, because look, every project throws its own unique things, but if we all know that we're going to get it done, and we get it done, and it is hard, but we have managed to have fun, there's this kind of place where we can all be appreciative of each other. And that's kind of where it is for me, because like we all have each other's back. And then once you get over that hump or get past that datum or over the line, whatever metaphor you want to use, it's almost like it becomes this foundational relationship, right? It's like you said, a friend.
Yeah.
You have those friends where, okay, you don't see them or talk to them for 20 years, maybe 20 years along, and 5 years, 10 years. But then as soon as you reconnect, it's just like you picked up right where you were.
Absolutely.
But it took a lot of work to get it to that point.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of trust. It's a lot of respect. It's a lot of like knowing who each other are and respecting each other too. I think that all across the board, I couldn't put my finger on all of those things, but you just know it, right? I mean, that's the part that I love the most, is that, you know, at that point you're like, all right, you know, we both trust each other. We know what's going to happen in this sort of work relationship and this friend relationship. And, you know, I'm going to follow through everything, and you're going to follow through everything too. And then it's just a better relationship. And it means for a strong trust. And I think, you know, I worked for a previous firm who used to use the term trusted advisor. And for a long time, I didn't really I kind of understood what it was, but it felt like just a strong business term to me. But, you know, I mean, I think it's just a business term for a friend, right?
Yeah. But yeah, because it's like, it's that, the friends aren't going to hold back, right? They're going to let you know really it's like you always know where you stand. There's not like you're wearing a mask or you have to masquerade about something. It's just, you're just there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then going to that idea of nurturing these relationships and building partnerships, and then looking at it through that filter of friendship, which I know so many people, like, they don't want to be friends with the people they work with. They just want to do the work and be done. And that's okay.
Yeah. I agree.
But as someone who has such an amazing catalog of work within the hospitality industry, like, how does that idea, that through that lens of friendship and all of your creations that you've completed or in the middle of, like, how do you define hospitality?
Man, well, I mean, I think that's where it gets back to that whole conversation of being friends. And uh, you know, we were having a conversation with a business consultant of ours the other day about, you know, being able to just talk to your clients in a way that you're open and vulnerable with them about what you're doing and how you're doing it. I mean, it's all this whole process is all about creating a beautiful space and making sure that you're able to do it successfully and I don't know. I mean, be open about that work, right? It's not just I guess it's not just a job. It's just being a part of the creation of something. And I don't know.
One of the things that you were saying, just being open and vulnerable. So in this kind of learning about hospitality, which really with this podcast for me is, it's kind of helping to fill in with that it's making that gray area of what hospitality is darker. Because I don't know if there's a binary answer, but it's really this thread that runs through everything is this idea of openness and vulnerability. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed speaking to you about over the years is just that idea of like culture and how do you build that and how are you aware of it? And I think the only way that you can be aware and build and create culture is if you are, and the people you surround yourself are open and vulnerable.
Absolutely. I think our staff as a whole, I think we're all very open to talking about things across the board. I mean, our company is, very much open book to the rest of the staff. Everybody knows the fee proposals. Everybody knows what the how things are going. And I would say even during the pandemic, we're probably more open and honest than we've ever been with people. We're saying, this is where the money is. This is where the money's going. This is what hopefully is coming in so we can survive this extravaganza. So I think that that's key, that we can all have that open and honest conversation. I mean, Dave and I are very clear with everybody in the office, like we're still learning every day. We may or may not have the right answer, but we're going to try something. And if it works, we're going to go with it. If it doesn't, then we'll make adjustments and continue to go from there. So it gets back to that kind of gray area. I think learning and understanding that you can live in a gray area for a little while and maybe maybe that's okay, and be understanding of that, and that we're all kind of helping each other to go forward. I also think that, one of the things that we profess around here is that, that the entire office is the A team, right? The A team may have to be a leader one day and a follower the next, but we're all going to get an opportunity to do something really cool. So let's just all work together and literally be one giant team to continue to move that forward. So
as long as everyone has an opportunity to be B.A. Baracus from the real A team, because that is the jam.
That was on this weekend. I almost watched a little bit. Anyway.
So I want to dig into that open and vulnerable thing again, or idea, and especially as maybe let's go to a client before they become a friend. So maybe it's a first client.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you've done one or two projects with them. Can you give an example of one of those, of an early client where they were open and vulnerable? Like maybe you were concepting things, but somehow maybe it wasn't jibing. They became open and vulnerable. You met where the project needs to be. You found that place, and then it proceeded into a deeper friendship.
Interesting. I mean, I think the two that I've given already were kind of the best of the best, because they are sort of really good friends now. And, I think, so I don't know if this is going to be as far along as possible, but, I actually just had a meeting this week with, it's not quite exactly this example, but I had a meeting this week with a client that I had worked with in 1999 when I had just graduated college.
Wow.
On his house. And we've stayed in touch with the contractor who built it. And he's decided that he wanted to do some further renovations there was actually a renovation in between. And they called and they were like, hey, now that you have your own company, would you be interested in working through this? And he really wants sort of a restaurant feel. So that was kind of a good dovetail into this. It's a kitchen, it's a bunch of other things. The guy's got an amazing art collection. And it was like, it was so funny because I was like, well, 99. All right, that was a long time ago. Let's meet. But it was kind of like you were describing earlier, like the old friends aesthetic. Like we walked in the first like 10 minutes and he was like, all right, remember we did that in 99? We decided to do this and we did that. And he was like, tapping me on the shoulder. Like we had been hanging out since 1999 till now. Like it was like an instant reconnection of like, all right, we need to get back into this. And we started talking about what we wanted to do. And it was interesting because at that time I felt like we were very in sync.
Mm-hmm.
And when he started sending, I did actually while I was with you in Vail, I was sketching some ideas for this house. He sent some sort of look and feel images that he really loved through the contractor to us, and it was like almost like everything was like this. Like his imagery and what I was sketching was like almost exactly the same. So it was very clear that we had kind of hit the right synergy. So it was kind of nice to be back in that zone again. And just feeling like we had connected on that level that you're describing at a time when, and I'll be honest, at that time in 1999, I wasn't really fully prepared for doing that kind of work, right? Residential is a very personal environment.
Totally.
And which is why I stopped for a while. That's why I went to OPX. That's why I went to a bigger company, was to get away from that. And now I feel like our company now is even more geared towards that than it's ever been, because residential is a lot like hospitality in that sense, and that you really want to work with your clients in a way that you don't in like commercial interiors or office space. You want to become friends. You want to understand how they live. You want to get a sense of what they want the room and space to feel like. And that's where I think hospitality and residential blend. And I think that's where restaurant blends in. And that's why everybody wants their office space to feel like hospitality, and because it has a feeling.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you say that, because I haven't really spoken that much about the hospitality versus the residential, but whether you're doing hospitality or commercial or restaurant, let's just go with those three, or any kind of commercial design, you have this psychographic of who's going to be there. But it's again, going back to that gray area, right? It's a pretty broad, but narrowed enough in focus on like, who's working here, who's visiting here, what do they need? What are their needs? How do we nurture those needs, right? But it's not so binary. Whereas in residential, it's totally binary, because you have to get into their brain and psyche and really break it down.
Yeah. And understand how they want to live, all that, understand, like you get into habits and what you do and don't want. And sometimes you say you don't want something, but you kind of do. Like it's very interesting. But I've always equated restaurant a lot to residential in that sense, because it is, a lot of times it's the first time, they don't really know what they want. It's somewhat personal. It's not all of it, but it's a lot of it.
And this is really interesting. So if you were to take the residential work that you've done on one side and then the commercial work you've done, which one do you think informs the other one more? Like which side of the scale learns more from the other?
I feel like it's just a constant back and forth between the two of them. I feel like hospitality used to be sort of aspirational in some ways for residential, but now I feel like residential is kind of blown by that, and hospitality is trying to catch up in some cases, which I find fascinating.
Can you give an example just to walk our listeners through?
I think in some cases, like the way that residential picked up speed in the world of television and other components, it really started to have a lot more of a life of its own from a design standpoint. There's a feeling that people want. There's a look that people want that you see replicated a lot. And I feel like that started now to kind of swing back and start to push hospitality and hotel, especially, to feeling more like more and more residential and more of that, whether it's plants or, adding technology that's similar to your house. Like you can have your house fully automated very easily. And I think hotels now are like, whoa, we can do this.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
they're taking more tentative steps into that because they have more iterative challenges. When you do that in your house, if it doesn't work, it's no big deal. But if you do in 100 hotel rooms, it's a big problem.
yeah.
So, but by the same token, I think that there are some key elements that are kind of floating back and forth between the two of them, that hotels are trying to execute in one way and residential is executing in another.
Hmm. And then looking at that kind of ongoing dialogue between residential and hospitality, if you think about all the, again, crucibles of this interaction, and like all this new stuff is coming out, right? Are any of those giving you concern going forward?
I mean, in what way? Like Big Brother is watching kind of way, or?
Sure. That's okay. So that brings up a really good story. I remember, I don't know if it was 10 or 15 years ago. It could have been 10. I was watching 60 Minutes, and there was this American who I think was a POW in North Korea. He wound up staying there, having a family, and they did a whole story on him. I think he's since passed, but there was this little speaker, like would be in our like classrooms growing up, with the little felt speaker cover, but it's a big wooden box up there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was like the supreme leader would, or the news would just be going in, and you could never turn it off, but there would always be there. And I assume it could listen. I remember looking at that 10 years ago and being like, that is so crazy. How can anyone live with that? And it's forced upon everyone. Now it's like we're welcoming all of this
Yeah.
into
It's on
where
our
we
phone
are.
every day.
Yeah, it's like we volunteer it. Whereas, and it's so crazy to me that, it's like that the frog that's in, that you put in boiling water, they'll jump right out. So that was my
Yeah.
first experience. But now it's like, hey, we have an Echo or an Alexa or a whatever, or an iPhone. And I don't know, it's the water's just slowly been getting warmer and warmer.
Yes, all day, every day, right? I mean, I think that's there is always going to be like a push and pull of wanting things to be tailored to all of our individual likings, but also yet you can't have that without eliminating or giving away some of your privacy of what your individual likings are, right? So
Yeah.
there's always going to be sort of that push pull. I will say I've been surprised how much people are willing to like give away things really without even thinking about what the larger implications might be. But I mean, hey, is it worth it so that I walk into my hotel room, the TV's on the right channel, the temperature's at the right place, and the lights are just dimmed to what I want them to be? Maybe. Providing they're not also tracking my retirement savings and like all this other stuff. But
Yeah.
I mean,
uh, I remember the first conversation I had on the first podcast I recorded was with Bashar, and he was like, why can't, when I check in somewhere or when I book, why can't they just ask me what temperature I like my room, so that they know when I'm coming up and my room is that temperature? And I was like, that just seems really easy. How come we haven't gotten there yet? But I'm sure it's coming.
oh, it's coming. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The level of technology that they're putting into guest rooms, potentially, I assume that's going to kind of flow down from luxury down through to select service. But I mean, right now, as they get more and more advanced, it'll become much and much easier.
Hmm. And then if you think about the projects that you're seeing on the residential and on the commercial side, and specifically hospitality, as it pertains to technology, what's exciting you most about the future?
I am excited about that, the connected rooms and how they are, more versatile, and how I can kind of control it when I walk in the room. I think I like that idea, but I also, there's some nervous components of it too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also think that a lot of that's going to start to push towards being more sustainable and using less energy across the board too, because now you're going to end up being able to tailor things a little bit easier. And it also means that the hotel can control things a little bit easier too. So they can become more efficient about, when the room is occupied and how well it's running, and just being more efficient about what that room's going to be like all the time. So I think there's upsides and downsides to it. So, but I'm excited either way of where it's going. I love the fact that now lighting, especially lighting technologies, are changing in such a way that they're becoming so small that can be so much better integrated into millwork, case goods, flooring, ceilings, that kind of thing. I'm excited to see where that's going to continue to go and grow from, because it just adds opportunity when you can kind of put it in new places.
It's so funny. I heard you say integrate, and I was out to dinner during one of these I think it was Independent Lodging Congress down in Miami. And I think his name was Dan, but I don't remember his first name exactly, but he was introduced to everyone like, this is Dan, the integrator. He integrates technology. And I was like,
Hey,
oh, wait, you integrate technology? But now if you think about it, it's probably one of the most important things as everyone is talking about it. And to be an integrator of technology to where it's really seamless, and then we can get back to focusing on just being present. Kind of a cool place that we need to be.
And I don't know if you've seen during the pandemic, a lot of restaurants moved to like a QR code. I forget the term. I just heard the other day, swarm. It's called like a swarm process. So rather than having servers, you have a series of people that are bussers and servers. And then you just use a QR, and then you start a tab, you close the tab. But those people that sort of swarm around are there to give you help, advice. They're sort of like acting like a server, but clearing your table at the same time. And it's kind of an interesting, delicate balance. And that's how technology has been really integrated in sort of the restaurant world, when everything went to a place where maybe you didn't want to have as many servers around as possible, or couldn't have as many servers around because they weren't there.
Well, that's another thing. And another thing that keeps coming up in these conversations is, if you think about innovation, and when innovation comes, it's usually, necessity being the mother of all invention. It's when these constraints are put on us, right?
Yeah.
So actually, I know you grew during the pandemic, which congratulations again, but like, what were some of the biggest constraints that helped you grow as a business, but also personally?
I mean, well, I'd say it wasn't really a constraint. We just had a lot of free time for a while there, in some cases towards the, middle of the pandemic. One of the things that we did internally was, everybody put together a list of 5 things that they thought we could improve in the office. So we then boiled those down to like the top 10 things, and basically had set teams, gave them project numbers, and set people assigned to solving those problems. One of them was our project folders were a little confusing. So we scrapped our project folder structure and did a whole new one, which everybody bought into, and it now is our process moving forward. I think that it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't really a constraint necessarily. It was just that all of a sudden we had time to turn around and look at the business in a little bit more of a, different light, per se.
Yeah, you could work on it rather than in it.
Yes.
Right.
Which is not something you have an opportunity all the time. That's part of the problem.
Totally.
You're always moving 1,000 miles an hour, and you finally get to look at it from a different vantage point, and you're like, oh, we should fix this.
Yeah, it's nice because so often, in starting up so many companies and just having friends that have it's almost like you're building this airplane while you're taking off, right?
All the time.
But it's also, as entrepreneurs, I feel like the airplane is never built.
It is never. There's maybe 2 wings, and that's about it. We're kind of floating. I don't know if we're going to be able to land, but it's fun. That's the best part. I think when we first started this, my business partner's wife was asking, we were talking about, she had her own business for a long time. And, I told her that I felt like it was riding a bike downhill with your hands and legs out to both sides, hoping you're not going to crash.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's actually a casting opportunity for the movie Jackass.
yes, exactly. Because you might run off a jump and land on something. But but I think that in the grand scheme of things, that was the one big upside to the pandemic. Look, it sucked for a long time. Who knew that we were gonna survive per se? I mean, I think we did change our structure. We went towards more residential for a long time. We we were lucky enough to have a couple of clients. We had one project that was a courtyard in Louisiana that they had some money, so they would release us by phase. So they released us for schematic design. We worked on that work for a month. We paused for 2 or 3 weeks, and then they were like, all right, we think we're going to be okay. Let's go to DD. So it was almost like we were all on this our own slow burn to get through the pandemic. And similar with some restaurant projects. And we were lucky enough that the end of the pandemic started to pick up speed with restaurants, because there was, as I'm sure you had in your neck of the woods, there were some restaurants that fell out of that, and some great locations that suddenly opened up. And we were lucky enough to have a couple of clients that did figure out how to make some money during the pandemic, and they were like, well, the leases are good. This is a good opportunity to strike. We can generate some cash. Let's do it. So, that was sort of a good thing in that sense. And then, at the same time, we also took some time to look at staffing and who we wanted to hire and how we wanted to hire, and some opportunities came about, and that also worked out.
Yeah. It's funny. It's also kind of just a perspective thing as well, because, as you were talking about leases and things coming available through the pandemic, there's the companies that are growing and being opportunistic, and the ones that are being defensive. And I read a book by Danny Meyer. I think it was called Setting the Table.
Beautiful.
And
book.
It's amazing, right?
It is so good. That a salt shaker is probably my favorite. Anyway, go on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but he's amazing. First of
awesome.
all, second of all, there was this idea where I think it was his dad. But it had to do with leases, because leases are just like long-term liabilities, right?
Correct.
But his dad, I think, actually taught him to look at them as assets, because if you have that restaurant in that spot on a long-term lease, no matter what happens, it's still going to be wanted. So instead of looking at it as a liability, look at it as an asset. And that's totally wacky from an accounting perspective, but it's also a way of looking at things from an abundant perspective.
Yeah. Well, and I think he had other opportunities there too, where he was talking about like going on the offensive instead of being on the defensive in a downturn. And I'll be honest, I think that was kind of our one of the biggest mantras. We were like, all right, what else? So the 5 things, how can we improve those things? We also looked at other things that we needed to do internally that could help us on the outward facing side of things. We added a rendering software. We added just little changes that we knew would help us on the outcome. And it has dramatically helped. That the rendering software we added, I can send you a QR code. You can scan it with your phone and look at the rendering in your phone. It's amazing.
Really? Is it your own software you developed?
No,
or is it?
It's something that it's called Enscape. There's a couple of firms now that use it, but it was when we added it, it was like a showstopper for some of our clients, because they'd get this QR code in their email and they just boop, and then they're like, oh, nice, I can see the whole space. So
what's really cool on the rendering side? I was shown this. When was that? In maybe November. DDON, they always go around and do this like tour de monde, where they bring product and models and photographers all over the world, right? And do these incredible shoots. It's super expensive. It's not very sustainable, but it always yielded. I think they kind of created that look and that genre for shooting furniture. But what they've been working on over the past, I think more than a year, is they hired a gaming engine company, and they've rendered these incredible landscapes. So mountain, sea, jungle, almost like, and put these incredible architectural homes on them. all in this gaming engine. But
Oh,
it's almost like James Bond kind of villain, man with the golden gun kind of
right, right,
landscapes and
right.
homes. But one of the things I found is, okay, so we see renderings all the time, but you're looking at it within the house, right? Or within the room or within whatever it is. What's cool about this, the gaming engines, and I think we're just on the very early stage of this, it's not just that you can see it in the house or in the room, but you can actually zoom out and see the landscape around it and come around, and the light. It is just unreal as
Yeah,
far as where that whole thing is going.
absolutely is. I mean, I was, Dave and I are old. And there have been a number of times where I look down and go, wow, if I had this software when I was in college, amazing things could have happened. My pen and my pencil were not doing this. I couldn't zoom out. I don't, but it's incredible. It's incredible to see. And it really is I feel like our clients can experience their spaces long before they're built.
Yeah.
And it really helps. We have some other clients that, just a couple of visualizations and looking at it, and, they've changed their server patterns because, they were looking at a banquette and it was a long banquette. And I was like, I think we need to break that banquette so you can get a server can walk around and not go all the way around the restaurant. And they were like, we need to do that. So 4-foot opening and, instant change in how the service was going to work. So,
That's really,
there's a
that's
lot of
super cool.
benefits.
That actually reminds me, I saw this really interesting virtual reality. Nvidia was showing it, and it had to do with, they built this model for BMW of their factory with the
Mm,
cars going down the assembly line. And then when they were, I think that they, you could have the workers in there, the robots, all the inventory coming in, but they basically built their whole assembly line, which is really kind of working a restaurant and serving in a restaurant, right? It's, you're taking product and getting it to
yeah,
its end
getting it to the
use.
table. Yeah.
And then but they could tweak the assembly line virtually first to make sure that, hey, or can we add this new bumper or this new modification, and how would that work, and how would people stage before you actually do it in a factory? Because once you stop the factory, I mean, you
You lose
stop
money every
printing
step.
money. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, that's kind of the biggest benefit that I see. We've done, we've been looking at that on the hotel side, testing rooms in that way. I think you still have to build a final version of the room, but I think using the 3D tools in a way that you can really zoom in and touch details and see things, um, and then get a sense of what it really is going to be like, it makes a huge difference. Uh,
Yeah, I'm also curious because everyone's like, oh, why don't we do this model room in VR? And I think that could be part of the design process. And maybe I'm just old school, but I think that especially with FF&E, where the guests are actually touching and feeling, and the housekeepers are coming in and need to see how everything works. And I just feel like and the amount of money they're spending per room, like, to me, I feel like you still have to build that room. I don't know.
Totally.
Have you seen it done where it can be just done, all done virtually?
No, not 100%. I think you still have to do I think it's an intermediate step that might save problems on the final step, but I think
Mhm.
it's a good intermediate step. I wouldn't
Mm.
say that it can be eclipsing the actual model room, because you're right. There's a tactile component. There's you really need to feel and touch and push on
And hear and
hear.
smell, and
Yeah.
it's like getting all the senses ignited.
Yeah, all of those things that you can't do in a VR. I'd say
Mhm.
putting it all together and feeling like the composition is right is fine, but the tactile and the smell and the hearing component are all big pieces of that, which is why that will never take away from, full built environment, right? You've got to test and touch, and you have to have some things that are built
Mm,
before you roll it all out, if you will.
mm. I totally agree, Dave. Talking about all this exciting tech and everything else, but, like, let's just move the tech aside, and just overall excitement for our industry and hospitality. What's exciting you most about the future?
The fact that it's sort of kicking up and raring to go all of a sudden. I feel like it's really getting out of the doldrums and really wanting to move forward. I love the fact that everything is pushing on a design bent these days. I feel like in the past it has sort of suffered from like a repetitive nature, And I still think there's a danger of that, even with the level of um, the level of detail that we're getting to these days. But I feel like every space now, or every hotel that I see that's built, has a little bit more uniqueness to it, which I think is awesome. It means that there's attention being paid to details and finishes in a way that hasn't been before. And that excites me. I think we want to be doing more of that for sure, because that's the fun stuff, right? When you get to actually think about it and execute it, and then go and visit and touch it as something that you've completed, is the best part.
And then on that excitement for just the finishes and the touching and the feeling, like, and design really coming to the forefront, because I've really seen over the past 20 years, I've seen the transformation and the importance of design overall is just incredible, and the amount of investment that's gone into that is just incredible. How, in your like, what's the most impactful way to have design impact hospitality?
I mean, well, one, using a good designer that can execute that piece. I think that it's getting the team together and talking about what the space wants to be from the beginning, and everybody's got to really be interested in it. I think it's important that not just the design firms are sort of in it, but also the development team, the ownership team, the operations team, because if we're not all in sync, what's going to happen is there's going to be a beautiful space that somebody's going to want to change or adjust in a way that didn't function right, or or just doesn't function for what their use is, and that just means it's not going to work right. I think you can use the bar flip top is one of the best examples of that in the world. I can't tell you how many bars I've been in where the flip top never actually flips down, right? So it's kind of the same thing, right? You design this beautiful space and there's a flip top that's all the way hanging out up there. But we talk about this a lot in restaurants, where people are like, "Oh, we'll just put this in and we'll slide it into the corner." And I was like, "But people need that all the time." Yeah. Well, then they're just going to leave it out. Like, it's not going to go back into that corner every time. So it's a lot of that piece, is getting the team together in a way, and everybody's running towards that. Because I think you're right that as we're talking about, design is becoming much more of the forefront, but you can't lose sight of the heart that's behind it, and it means that everybody has to be a part of that heart. The developer, the owner, all of those pieces have to be attentive to it.
That's a very profound way of putting it. And then, okay, so then let's say everyone's aligned. You have the ops, you have the design, ownership, development, everyone's in alignment. You have a great project. Then you go, there's other projects where you're not all firing on the same cylinders, you're not all aligned. Do you have any special hacks or tricks or techniques to step back, create a moment where you can actually get all aligned?
I think I don't know if I have the full hacks for it. I think it's also a little bit about just listening to the room and understanding what's happening. We started this conversation talking about being vulnerable and open to conversation, and I think that some people in those types of conversations don't stop and listen. And sometimes you've got to help encourage the crowd to kind of stop and just have that conversation. Or draw out the people that aren't, when you're not aligned like that, the crowd knows who's not in alignment. So it may mean stopping and saying, "All right, you haven't spoken in a little while, Mr. Ops guy. What's bothering you? Because there's something wrong. So let's get into that a little bit, and let's spend the right time." I think time is actually a big problem these days, especially because there is so much going on that there's not a lot of time to spend having those conversations, and everybody wants to rush to be done. And that's, I think that's going to be to the detriment of a lot of things. So
I find, and I'm amazed by all these conversations with architects and designers and just your ilk, who can take these ideas and actually make the built environment out of them, right? And I find the most successful ones are the ones who, okay, they can all focus on what they've built and designed and execute it and get it there. But I think something that you said about it's reading the room, hearing the room, but it's also like listening to the negative space or what's unsaid.
Yeah,
And being able to hear in the build thing, okay, you have the positive space. This is the shape and the form of the space that we're building, but also with the team. And then what impact is the negative space or the void? That sometimes the void is more informative than anything else.
totally. Well, yeah, I mean, especially if you don't go out and draw out what's missing. You know, if you don't, you end up in like a gotcha moment later, because it's like this is the one thing I always try to avoid is like, oh, well, we should have done this. Well, what do you mean you should have done that? Shouldn't we have talked about that 6 weeks ago when we were? But that mistake is our mistake for not stopping earlier and being like, you know, Mr. Operations guy, you haven't said anything. How do we talk about this a little bit more in a different way? And I think I would argue that a lot of times it is sort of in the ops side that does happen, because it's,
I think it is because, you know, most of those many of those ops guys and gals, they'd want to be quiet, because I also think that sometimes they don't want to say what they want because they also want to have the ability to bitch later when it's not working for them.
I mean, maybe though, I can definitely tell you there are times when we've gotten to that point where you're like, oh, they're like, oh, this doesn't work because of this. And you're like, well, at what point did you say that needed to work because of that? And, you know, I'm not a mind reader. So it's a lot of times where now more than ever, it's a lot of just stopping and listening.
Well, I'd push back on that. I think you say you're not a mind reader, but I think that's part of what's gotten you to the place that you are. Maybe you're not relying on reading the mind, but you're looking at that negative space or the void and saying, okay, we need to pull something out and fill this void here.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay. So Dave, going back to 1999, you're fresh out of school. You met that who maybe is not the friend yet, but you're working with the contractor, right? That was the story.
Yeah.
If you, Dave, that I'm talking to right now, went back to the Dave of 1999, what advice would you give yourself in 1999?
You know, I think at this stage, it's more of just like getting to know, not being afraid to get to know the clients better and get to know the people better. You know, I wouldn't change anything that I've done up until now. Maybe if we had started this a little sooner, it would be a different story. But you know, I think what got me here is sort of just being patient and understanding and trying to understand what my clients were going through. And you know, then it just was a time of like getting used to what is design at that point, and having really high hopes to work on like high design projects, right? And not really being sure what that was at the time. But you know, thank God I got put into a hospitality project in 2005, and it was a whole new world.
Maybe you would have told yourself to lean into hospitality a bit more back then.
Probably. It definitely it was something on the horizon. It felt good. I knew I wanted to get into restaurants a little bit, but it wasn't until I got into a hotel project that I met all these amazing people and got to really do some fun stuff. So it was very eye-opening at that point.
Awesome. Dave, if the listeners want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
You know, you can go through our website, www.3877.design, or my email is dt@studio3877.com.
Awesome. Well, Dave, I just want to thank you for your time. And
for sure,
you know, this has been so wonderful just to get to know you in a different way. And also I can't wait to, well, hope maybe with Alia, but just you and me, we go to Cranes or Succotash or one of your other projects and have that awesome martini there as well.
I love it. Well, the Cranes guys are opening another restaurant, so I'll check that one out.
Oh, good. And also, most importantly, the listeners, I just want to thank you, because the show has just been growing and I've been getting such great feedback, and my guests have been getting such great feedback. So if this has evolved your opinion on what hospitality is, how to deliver it, how to make others feel feel comfortable, how to make yourself feel more vulnerable, please share the podcast with a friend. And thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Dave.